It's hard to even begin to process what my brother has done. The whole thing feels surreal, like a betrayal of everything I thought I understood about family, about loyalty, and about the kind of person my brother was. But when you step back and look at it all, what he's done is nothing short of catastrophic. I've spent days trying to make sense of his choices, trying to figure out why he would do something so cruel to his wife, to my mother, and to the family as a whole. And the more I think about it, the more my head spins, because none of it makes sense. It doesn't add up. The timing, the deceit, the lack of consideration for anyone but himself. It's almost incomprehensible. Last fall, our mother was in the hospital, fighting for her life. She was dying of leukemia. The doctors had given her a grim prognosis, and all of us, myself, my sister, and my brother, knew that her time was running out. It was a period of pain and heartache for all of us, a time when family should have been the priority, when we should have rallied around each other, especially our mom. But that's not what my brother did. Instead, while our mother was lying in that hospital bed, barely able to hold herself together, my brother chose that moment to do the unthinkable. He cheated on his wife. His wife, who was doing everything she could to take care of our mother. His wife, who had spent years by his side, supporting him through everything, including the struggle to start a family. She had been a rock for him, and yet he chose to betray her in the worst way possible at the most vulnerable time. I still can't wrap my mind around it. He knew what was happening to our mom, how much she was suffering, and yet he still made that choice. It was as if he had no sense of loyalty, no understanding of the gravity of the situation, no thought for how this would destroy his wife. But it wasn't just the affair. It wasn't just that he cheated on her. What's even more unbelievable is what happened after. My brother and his wife had been trying for a decade to have children. They had gone through years of infertility treatments, struggling with the pain of trying and failing, until finally, they had saved up enough money to go through in vitro fertilization. And when our mom's life insurance payout came through, my brother didn't think twice. He used that money to help finance the procedure. The money meant for our mom's funeral and expenses after her death became the money used to give his wife the family they had dreamed of having. She was pregnant with twins, a blessing she had waited for so long. But at the same time, she was suffering. She had developed painful uterine fibroid hemorrhages due to a blood vessel complication, making her pregnancy even more difficult than it already was. And in the midst of all of this, when his wife was doing everything in her power to make sure their family was growing, my brother decided that it was the perfect time to drop a bombshell on her. Yesterday, he told her, not only that he had had an affair, but that the mistress had had his child. Not just any child, but a newborn. A baby that had been born while his wife was pregnant with their twins. And the worst part? He had known about the child long before his wife even got pregnant. The sheer audacity of it all is staggering. He knew about the affair before his wife's pregnancy even began, yet he chose to go ahead with everything. He continued with the in vitro process. He continued with their plans, knowing that his wife was carrying their twins, knowing she was struggling with her health, and knowing he was lying to her face. He didn't have the decency to come clean, to be honest with her, to stop and think about what he was doing. Instead, he carried on with the charade, all while knowing that he was bringing innocent children into a world built on lies and deceit. The worst part is that he made the decision to keep everything going. The mistress didn't want his help, he said. She didn't want anything from him. So, rather than telling his wife the truth, he decided to keep everything hidden, to live his life as if nothing had changed. He had no respect for her, no respect for their relationship, no regard for how his actions were destroying her, destroying the family. I don't understand any of it. How could he do this? How could he stand by while his wife was literally fighting for her life and carrying their children, only to betray her in such an unimaginable way. How could he live with himself, knowing what he had done, knowing that his lies would eventually tear everything apart? And what about the children involved in all of this? Two sets of children now. His wife's twins, and the baby born from the affair. How are they supposed to navigate this mess? How are they supposed to grow up in a world where everything is built on deceit, betrayal, and dishonesty? It didn't stop there. After he finally admitted everything to his wife, after the weight of his betrayal crushed her, they had a gender reveal party. Just days ago, they celebrated the pregnancy of their twins, surrounded by friends and family. My brother, the man who had shattered his wife's world, stood there smiling, celebrating with everyone as if nothing was wrong, as if his affair, the life he had destroyed, was all just a minor inconvenience. His wife's family was there, excited and hopeful for the new babies. How would you feel if your partner hid their affair for months or even years? Write in the comments. They were going to welcome into the world, unaware of the devastation that had already been set in motion. I don't know what he was thinking. Was he trying to continue with life as if nothing had changed? Was he trying to pretend like the pain he caused didn't matter? Did he think that his wife would just forgive him? That everything would be fine as long as the twins were born healthy? But how could she ever forgive him? How could anyone forgive such a betrayal, especially at such a vulnerable time? She had given him everything. She had supported him through thick and thin, and this is how he repaid her. It's impossible for me to understand. It's impossible for me to fathom how someone could be so callous, so selfish, so utterly disconnected from the person they claim to love. My brother has always been someone I looked up to, someone who I believed had strong morals, someone I thought would never do something like this. But now, I don't recognize him. I don't recognize the man he's become. And the worst part is, I don't know how to help him. I don't know if there's any way to fix what he's done, to mend the pieces of his life that he has destroyed. I don't know if there's a way back for him, or for the family he has torn apart. This isn't just a story of a man who cheated on his wife. It's a story of broken trust, broken hearts, and broken families. It's a story of the consequences of selfishness, of choices that can never be undone. It's a story of a family caught in the crossfire of a man's lies, a woman's pain, and children who will grow up in a world that is forever changed by what has happened. I don't know how it will end, but I know that this is a chapter none of us will ever forget. The weeks following my brother's revelation felt like a blur, a nightmare that kept looping, repeating in ways I couldn't control. I kept asking myself if I had somehow missed the signs. I couldn't understand how my brother could betray his wife so callously, at such a crucial moment. But the worst part wasn't just the affair itself. It wasn't even the fact that my brother had created a new life, a child with someone else, while his wife was carrying their twins, in pain, struggling with her health. What tore me apart more than anything else was the way he carried on like nothing had happened. I was forced to watch as he pretended nothing had changed, as if the world hadn't just shifted beneath his wife's feet. He continued to go to work, to attend family events, to be the same person he always had been in public, while privately he was living a life of lies. He was still smiling, still participating in family celebrations, as though the devastation he had caused didn't exist. It was almost like he was in denial, like he was trying to convince himself that his actions hadn't destroyed everything that mattered. My sister and I did what we could to support his wife, but it was so hard. She was crushed. She had given so much to their relationship, to their dream of becoming parents, only to find that her husband had been living a double life. What hurt me the most was the guilt she felt. She didn't want to burden anyone, didn't want to break apart the family, even though she was shattered inside. She tried to put on a brave face, to act like everything was okay for the sake of their children, for the sake of the family that had gathered around them. But it was clear that every smile, every conversation, every moment she spent pretending to be happy felt like a dagger to her soul. One day, she broke down. She called me in the middle of the night, her voice shaky and full of pain. It was the first time she had allowed herself to express the weight of the hurt she was carrying. I could hear the exhaustion in her voice, the sadness that she had kept hidden for so long. She didn't know how she was supposed to move forward. She didn't know how she could forgive him, or if she even wanted to. And as she spoke, I realized that she was still holding on to the hope that somehow my brother would realize the depth of the damage he had caused, that he would come to his senses and fix what he had broken. But it was clear that she was already starting to face the truth. Their marriage was forever changed. And yet, he continued to act as if he had done nothing wrong. He still came home every night, still played the role of the loving husband, still helped with the kids, as if everything was fine. He never truly apologized, never took full responsibility for what he had done. He said he was sorry, but it was empty. His words were hollow, and his actions spoke louder than anything he could say. He didn't want to deal with the consequences of his betrayal. He didn't want to face the truth of how deeply he had hurt the woman who had stood by him, the woman who had been his partner through everything. Instead, he hid behind his lies, behind his denial, and he hoped that time would somehow heal everything. But time doesn't heal all wounds. Sometimes, time only deepens them, making them fester and grow. Meanwhile, I watched as my sister-in-law struggled to keep it together. She had been through so much, and now, the future she had imagined with her husband seemed impossible. She had never imagined a life without him, but now, that future seemed uncertain, clouded by the shadow of his betrayal. She had to make the most difficult decision of her life, whether to stay with a man who had shattered her trust and her heart, or whether to leave him, to protect herself and her children from the pain he had caused. The hardest part of all this was watching my nieces and nephews. They had no idea what was going on. They were too young to understand the gravity of the situation. They didn't know that their parents' marriage was crumbling, that their father had betrayed their mother in the worst way possible. They didn't understand why their family was no longer the same, why there was tension in the air, why their mother cried when she thought no one was looking. They deserved better than this. They deserved a home where love and trust were the foundation, not lies and deception. As the weeks passed, the reality of what had happened began to sink in more and more. The affair wasn't just a moment of weakness. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a betrayal that cut deep, a betrayal that left scars that would never truly heal. It wasn't just about my brother's actions. It was about the impact of those actions on everyone around him. His wife, his children, the entire family, everyone had been affected by his choices. And the worst part was that he didn't seem to care. There were times when I tried to talk to him, to understand why he had done what he did. I wanted to know what drove him to make such a devastating decision. But every time I asked, every time I tried to get him to open up, he shut me down. He didn't want to talk about it. He didn't want to face the consequences. He just wanted to move on, to pretend that everything would be fine, as if the world hadn't just fallen apart. But I couldn't pretend. I couldn't ignore the pain, the hurt, the destruction he had caused. I couldn't pretend that everything was okay, that his lies didn't matter, that his betrayal hadn't broken everything we once had. And I knew his wife couldn't pretend either. No matter how hard she tried, no matter how much she wanted to hold on to the life they had built together, she knew that it was over. She couldn't stay in a marriage where she was constantly wondering if she could trust her husband, if he was going to betray her again. Eventually, the truth came out to everyone. It wasn't just the affair, it was everything that had followed. The lies, the manipulation, the complete disregard for the people who cared about him. It all came to light, And suddenly, my brother wasn't just a man who made a mistake. He was a man who had shattered everything for his own selfish desires. His wife filed for divorce. And no part of me felt sorry for my brother, the man who had once been my hero. Another part of me couldn't help but feel relief. He needed to face the consequences of his actions. He needed to understand the depth of the hurt he had caused. And maybe, just maybe, this would be the wake-up call he needed. But it was too late. His wife had already made her decision. She had already moved on, and she was starting the difficult journey of healing. As for me, I didn't know what to feel anymore. I loved my brother, but I couldn't condone what he had done. I couldn't support him in his lies and betrayal. But I couldn't abandon him either. He was my brother, after all, and family means something. Even when it feels like everything is falling apart, you still have to try to hold on to whatever fragments you can. But I knew one thing for sure. He had destroyed everything that truly mattered, and there was no easy way to fix it. In the end, there were no winners. There were only broken hearts, shattered trust, and a family left to pick up the pieces of what had once been whole. And as much as I tried to make sense of it all, I couldn't. The damage was done, and all we could do was try to move forward, to heal in our own ways, and to hope that one day we could learn to forgive, not just my brother, but ourselves for allowing this to happen.